Welcome to Mentoring Unlocked, hosted by Lindley, founder of Serendis Leadership and Mentor Key, the platform making mentoring impactful and elevating workplace development conversations. Maud is a renowned executive coach and leadership strategist with over 2 decades of experience, helping leaders unlock their full potential through adaptive leadership and meaningful mentoring. Tune in for personal mentoring stories, expert insights, practical tools, and bold conversations. Whether you're a mentor, mentee, or a culture shaper, there's something for you.
Gerard Perrignon, welcome. Thank you so much for joining Mentoring Unlocked podcast.
Thanks, Maud. Great to be here.
You have technically, this is not a hard and fast rule, but You've been a mentor on the Women in Banking and Finance Mentoring Program for 5 consecutive years. Now, that's dedication and commitment. And so generally the mentors who are returning and enjoying the program and giving so much to their mentees. Well, we want to know what's the secret? What's the recipe? We want to understand what drives you as a mentor. And so we're looking forward to hearing all of your insights on this podcast today.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's been 5 years. I should remember how I was introduced to the WIBIF mentoring program. It would have been through my employer, RBC.
Would you say you've been voluntold?
I may have been voluntold, but I think that I probably would have been very interested as soon as someone offered the idea of becoming a mentor in the WIBIF program. I think I would have been pretty interested at the time 5 years ago, and I haven't been disappointed. It's been an incredibly interesting and rewarding journey, hopefully for the mentees as well as me as a mentor.
It has been for the mentees as well. We know that because you
get the feedback.
The feedback. Yes, absolutely.
That's good to know.
Gerard, before we dive into mentoring, the complexity of the different roles of mentors and mentees and what makes a good mentoring partnership, which is all the themes that we'll explore today.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about you. I want our listeners to have some insights into who you are. You are obviously in the finance industry, say in investment banking, it's fair to say. You lead the APAC Financial Institution Group within Debt Capital Markets for Royal Bank of Canada.
That's correct.
So we call it the DCM FIG if we want to make it a little bit more snappy, short. First, tell us, what does that entail?
What does that mean?
What does that mean?
Debt capital markets effectively means the arrangement of bond transactions. So large institutions like banks or insurers who have a lot of leverage or debt on their balance sheet and continue to apply a lot of debt, go to the public bond markets to issue debt in large size. So RBC, amongst many other investment banks, compete to arrange those transactions, for example, for large banks. So we do that in terms of taking Australian or New Zealand or Asian banks into international currencies like US dollars, and we also do it by taking international issuers of bonds into our own Aussie dollar market here. So that's effectively what we mean when we talk about debt capital markets or DCM, and DCM sits within most large investment banks. Most large investment banks would have a reasonably large debt capital markets presence within their IB franchise, so if that helps.
It does help. It's about organizations funding themselves on the global debt market.
Exactly.
And what I find really interesting is because you cover the FIG, which is the financial institution, so as you said, large banks or insurers, you're actually funding Australian banks into introducing them to investors in global markets in other regions of the world. Does that mean you travel a lot?
We can travel quite a lot. I probably travel less now than I used to 15, 20 years ago, which is a really good thing given I have 4 children. So I think the travel becomes harder when you do have a family which is growing up. But still, the travel can be a reasonably significant component of. Yes. I just don't want to be doing it every month. A long haul trip every month starts to take its toll, but I don't do that much anymore. Yep.
Now, tell us tell us about your career. What has been the golden thread throughout your career? You shared with me just before we started it, actually, it's that people connection, which perhaps led you to particular different types of functions and focuses within investment banking. Tell us about what has kept you in this very fast-paced, high-pressure environment.
Well, I probably fell into it.
Yeah.
I can honestly sit here and say that as a 16-year-old or an 18-year-old or as a graduate that I was felt that I was destined to become an investment banker. But at some stage in my low 20s, I realised that I needed a job and needed to find an income, and somehow investment banking found me as opposed to the other way around, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So my journey into banking as a kid or as a graduate was probably quite different from the journey that other graduates had. I started with an undergraduate degree, which was an English literature degree. So,
was it?
So I had which is probably pretty different from the way a lot of kids get into banking these days. A lot of them are very finance oriented in terms of what they study, but I had none of that. And then after I did that degree, I dabbled in a few things. At one stage, I thought I wanted to play music professionally, but realised that probably was not going to pay the bills unless I was a global superstar. So I continued to probably in my low 20s think about career options and needing a job. And I think that the next thing I did was decided probably that something commercial like banking did make sense. So I went and did another degree. I did a master's degree in international relations, which carried with it some economics courses, which allowed me to present a resume which was not just about English literature, but a resume which had some degree of economics attached to it.
Yeah.
And having done that master's degree, it then allowed me to basically present myself with some degree of credibility to potential employers, which is what I did. And then from there on, the journey was probably more typical of a graduate in terms of applying, failing, applying, rejection, and continuing that process until someone gave me a shot.
Yes. Who gave you a shot first?
An English investment bank gave me a shot.
Yes.
And I'm very grateful that they did, and I'm very grateful to the person who ultimately hired me, because I still think back to this day that he would have looked at my resume and compared it to the resume of other applicants, and it wouldn't have been as robust from a financial perspective at all. But he saw something in me, and I suppose he was probably my first mentor, if you want to put it that way, and he did an incredible job for me over those first couple of years when I knew nothing, and was so green in mentoring, guiding me. But yeah, I'm very appreciative that he saw something in me which perhaps I hadn't seen in myself, and gave me that shot. So I sat as a graduate on the desk in Sydney, and within a year I found myself in London, which was a really, really fast turnaround from effectively nothing to be in a position where an opportunity was shown to me to move to London, which I didn't have to think about at all. So I took that, and that's probably one piece of advice which I gave myself or was given, which I would give to other people, was when you have opportunities like that, even though you're not sure whether you're capable or ready, opportunities like that are pretty important. So take them. I'm very glad I took that London opportunity.
And so you said this mentor saw something in you that perhaps you weren't aware of.
What was it?
Not sure.
Not sure. Probably it's a degree of determination.
Yes.
A degree of drive. Maybe a personality which was suited to a particular part of banking, which is what I'm still in now, which is debt capital markets. And what I like about that is the client interaction element to it.
Yes.
So perhaps he saw an ability in me to be an effective presenter, an effective communicator, which would work well in the part of an investment bank where you need to sell to clients and pitch to clients, which effectively is what a lot of debt capital markets is about that. So maybe that's what he saw.
Yeah.
I'll have to ask him.
Is he still?
He's still around, yeah. And I still keep in contact for him. Sure, he does. He's in London these days, but I do owe him a debt of gratitude, and I always say that to him when I see him infrequently. You gave me the first shot. I appreciate it a lot.
Perhaps at the time it was introducing some elements of cognitive diversity or diversity of strengths in a world that might have been dominated by very analytical, financial, economic sort of minded people. That person took a bet on you to bring a little bit more of that English literature in the financial markets.
Yeah, maybe it was something exactly like that. And he's just the type of person who probably would have thought laterally like that to think about what kind of diversity he could bring to the existing team to help strengthen it. So it could well have been something like that.
Yeah, brilliant. Gerard, let's talk about your mentoring experience.
Yeah.
When I meet mentors and mentees for the first time who are about to embark into a new journey together, I like to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of mentoring, because not all mentoring is the same. In fact, every single relationship is unique, of course.
Yeah.
But some actually achieve better results than others. Some partnerships do yield amazing outcomes for their mentees and for the mentors as well. And some relationships don't feel rewarding as much.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about your perception of the good, the bad, and the ugly of mentoring?
I don't know if I'd call it ugly, but I suppose it's not bad either. I suppose the bad side of it, from my perspective, comes when either the mentor or the mentee are at the table somewhat unwillingly. I can't remember what the expression was you used before. What did you call it?
Voluntold.
If you're voluntold to do it, either as a mentor or as a mentee, then you've got to embrace it. And if you don't embrace it and you have been voluntold and you're not there willingly and willing to give 100%, then potentially, though, I think those situations on either side of the table can create a situation where there's just not that fluidity of conversation and there's not that commitment.
Yeah.
And if it's like that, that's probably the grounds for a relationship over a mentor-mentee period, which can be 3 to 6 months in the WIBIF example, where the results are less ideal than what they would be if you had two participants sitting down willing to commit and willing to be consistent. So that's probably the bad side. Conversely, the good side, which is the mirror opposite, is when you have two people who are there for the right reasons and willing to. Consistency is a really important thing, I think, with mentoring and menteeing. And you find that the times when it doesn't go well is when either cancels, and sometimes you're going to cancel for legitimate reasons. Something's going to come up on either side, and you have to be flexible, of course. But I think you can get into situations of continual cancellations which send a message about the commitment of either the mentor or the mentee, which doesn't breed for a positive outcome at the end.
Yeah.
But if you've got consistency and you've got commitment and you've got openness, and there can be incredibly rewarding relationships on both sides of the coin.
Talking about the openness, because I think that's the critical ingredient to making sure that those experiences are not just meetings, but they are really bringing the depth that's required for the conversation to be meaningful. How do you get to that level of openness? So if you think about mentors who are perhaps new mentors joining the program with all the commitment and willingness to make this work. How do you get to that level of openness as quickly as possible?
I think one way you can do it as a mentees probably often come to the table with a degree of trepidation and nervousness about why they're there and what the outcome's going to be. And I think from me personally, a good way to break that down is just to continue to outline to the mentee or give them a list of the mistakes that I've made over my career. And I think doing that sort of unlocks that degree of trepidation and probably breaks down a barrier which might otherwise have existed between two strangers, because that's effectively what we are. But I think doing that can demonstrate a degree of vulnerability or transparency, which I think resounds well with a mentee, because it then allows them or gives them the freedom to think, well, if he's telling me about some of these major catastrophes that he's initiated or been involved with, then maybe I'm more comfortable to do the same with him. And I think once you've got that freedom of dialogue, I think that can create some really positive grounds for a discussion which helps things move forward.
Brilliant.
And mistakes are a really important part of a mentor-mentee discussion process, I think.
Yeah. Okay, so what you're telling us is, as a mentor, you want to bring that vulnerability quite quickly up front and share your mistakes or the moments that didn't quite work in your career.
Yeah.
Because it lowers, I guess, that need to perform for the mentee, or it invites the mentee to do the same, to actually lower that sense of fear and increase that sense of trust.
Exactly. And I think it also acts as a decent way to sort of create ideas of signposts in a career.
Yeah.
This is where it went right. This is where it didn't go so right. And when it didn't go so right, it was a learning experience which allowed me to think about these three things to try and pivot back that way. When you have those types of discussions, I always find that's pretty valuable, because mentees normally respond very well to that, because they've got the same experiences. They might have the same experiences in a shorter amount of time frame because they've got less experience, less years, but they've still got exactly the same experiences. And potentially, when you face those things in the early stage of your career, they can be more impactful in a negative way, and unless you deal with them effectively. And maybe having a mentor sit in front of you and talk about that helps them deal with it more effectively in the early stage of their career.
I guess normalize it.
Yeah. Exactly. Normalize it.
I just want to rewind back to what you have said, which is like at the upfront, in order for the mentee to feel that they can be really open, you want the mentor to share that vulnerability. It's interesting because what I have observed over the years is, we tell the mentors two things. We tell them you have to ask a lot of questions and don't talk too much about yourself, because you want to be focused on the mentee.
Yeah.
But also what I see is that sometimes mentors feel, well, I have to tell my mentee why I have the credibility to be here. And so the danger is that the mentor actually feels that they have to share all the great things they've done so that the mentee has that trust that their mentor is credible.
Yeah.
So how do you navigate those different injunctions as well to the mentor when they start?
Yeah, there's definitely a mistake sitting there and sort of outlining your resume and your successes, because I think a lot of that just wouldn't resound with a mentee. That's not why they're there.
Yes. They're not here to learn from your successes.
They're not here to learn from successes. And they're not here to listen to you tell them how good you are.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's if I was a mentee listening to that, I'd be pulling the switch on that immediately. It's not the reason they're there. So you probably just have to remind yourself that you're not in a pitch. You're not there to tell them how good you are. You're there to help them. And I think if you do that, you can probably avoid that. What did you call it? Overstepping.
So what I'm hearing from you is that actually, as a mentor, your role is definitely not to tell someone else how you've done things or where you did it right. But actually, if you share what you have learned from your failures or from the moments that didn't go so well, well, that actually you can share this, and it creates obviously an experience of learning or connection, but also it lowers that fear, and the mentee then feels that they can bring that vulnerability as well.
Yeah, exactly. And at the end of the day, I think these relationships between mentor and mentee are about the mentee empowering themselves to figure it out for themselves. You've got an hour with them once a month. You want to make the most of it. At the end of the day, it's about the mentee walking away from that and making their own decisions about where they're taking this. Taking their own career, and whether there's anything they could use from those discussions.
Yes.
And sometimes you've got really good mentor-mentee relationships where I've had mentees before and I love it, and you can tell they feel embarrassed by it, but I love it where they'll be peppering me with emails between the meetings. And I encourage it. I really like that. Whereas I think others feel as though that's overstepping the mark. Whereas one of the things I always say to them is, please, if you've got any other questions, please, I'm really happy to continue to answer those or talk engage with you in dialogue in between meetings. But at the end of the day, it's kind of up to them, right?
Yes. So tell me about, as a mentor, how do you prepare ahead of a mentoring session? What do you expect and hold yourself accountable to in a mentoring session for it to deliver actually what your intended outcomes for the mentee?
Well, it definitely works better if there's some degree of preparation on both sides. And generally the way I do it is end in a session and then asking the mentee to think about what they'd like to discuss in the next session. For me personally, I'll certainly take some cues in terms of what they say and make some suggestions about what ground might be worth covering in the next session. But I find it really helpful if they go away and think about it and come back to me with 5 bullet points and say, this is what I'd like to cover off in the next session. And if I have those ideas, then preparing for that next session becomes easy. And it's not a lot. It's basically just sit down and reading through the bullet points and coming up with some ideas about what might be worth discussing around those bullet points ahead of the session.
I like what you say, what might be worth discussing. It's not what advice you will give, but it's what might be worth discussing. Tell us more about that. How do you reflect on things that are worth discussing with your mentee once they have shared some bullet points?
A common one for mentees is the idea of networking, either internal networking or external networking. And I found a few mentees find that difficult as a way to advance their career path. So a simple example could be, let's think about networking next time as a discussion point if you're happy, and maybe both of us can bring some ideas about how we feel about doing it. A lot of people don't like doing it, which I totally get, but it's not a necessary evil, but it's an important part of navigating a career path in an upward trajectory, both externally with clients as well as internally with people. So just using that as a bullet point as an example where we both commit, we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about how we do it, whether we're good at it, whether we're bad at it, the mistakes we've made, how that process works. And sometimes I've spent the entire session just talking about the networking.
And you said sometimes mentees feel really inadequate. They don't like doing it.
Yeah, they don't.
They see it as a necessary evil, but it's hard for them to lean into that.
Yeah.
So in a typical session on the topic of networking, how would you help the mentee come up the curve of confidence and capability in engaging effectively with networking?
I think one is just empowering them with an idea of the fact that you don't have to do it, but if you do it, it's going to make a real difference. So despite the fact that you feel uncomfortable about doing it, and this is an important one, despite the fact you feel uncomfortable about doing anything, that doesn't necessarily mean that just because you feel uncomfortable about it, it's a reason not to do it.
Okay.
So if you don't like networking, maybe the first thing we can think about is the idea of discomfort not being put aside, but discomfort being a part of the feeling that you have when you decide that you're going to go and network, either internally or externally. A good example that I've learned myself and with mentees around the idea of internal networking is the idea of networking upwards. So not marketing your boss so much, but marketing your boss's boss. And I think a lot of mentees would find that idea to be daunting or uncomfortable.
Yes.
Whereas, and I've had this discussion a lot of times with mentees, and it all boils down, in my mind, to the idea of if you've got a boss who's supportive, your boss should be totally supportive of the idea of you sending a message to your boss's boss about some work you've been doing. But there's a degree of discomfort associated with attached to that. But maybe the idea here is not that you're ever going to rid yourself of that idea of, I don't really want to do this, it's a bit uncomfortable, as opposed to the idea of, I know I'm going to feel like that, but it's still important that I think about doing it.
So if I'm hearing this well, which I think is really interesting, is that you're trying to break down for your mentee the fact that discomfort doesn't mean that they should avoid it, that actually they should factor in the fact that discomfort is part of the experience and reframe it for them. And we've talked about it in the context of networking, but I'm sure it applies to a lot of other
so many other
topics.
yeah, absolutely.
How do you help the mentee articulate what they are uncomfortable about, and how do you help them actually make the decision eventually to embrace that discomfort?
How do I help them talk about what they're uncomfortable about? I think that, for me personally, going back to that strategy before in terms of talking about the mistakes which maybe I've made,
yes,
which allows the barrier to be broken down, which allows them to feel more comfortable about talking about areas of their career that might be quite personal to them. And sometimes they may feel embarrassed to talk about it. But if you're going to have an open discussion about moving forward, but being able to sort of shed that embarrassment, for want of a better word, I think is really helpful. So demonstrating the fact that we're all human, we all make mistakes. I've made plenty of them and we'll make plenty more, I think is a good way to start with those conversations about then introducing things like what you're not good at, what you don't like doing.
So
we could sit all day and talk about things you're good at, but speaking about what you're good at in mentoring, it's great, but is that really going to create development? Probably, in my mind, not as much as talking about the things which you're not so good at, and the things you don't like as much as work-ons.
I guess the mental barriers, the mental hindrances, or the mindsets that hold you back. That's what you want to effectively unpack in a mentoring session.
And hopefully is that what mentees want to unpack too? Is that why they're coming?
I don't think they know necessarily that's what is going to be the core of the discussion. Often mentees join in thinking you're going to tell me what to do. But what you're telling us is that, you can tell them what to do. But what's going to be more powerful is to help them unpack some of those cognitive barriers or some of those unhelpful mindsets that hold them back.
I think so.
How do you get to identify and unpack those mindsets that are unhelpful for them?
Well, I think it's just through conversation, and it's not so much trial and error, but it's conversations which include real life working examples on both sides of the table. Of some of these broader themes, and once you can unpack some of those real life examples, I suppose you can talk about mindsets then, and talk about what barriers might exist, like in networking, for example. Why are you afraid or reticent or concerned about going and have a conversation with your boss's boss about all this good work that you and your team have been doing? And how can we change that mindset?
So what is the mindset that perhaps you're not even conscious of? How can I help you bring that to consciousness? Because we know that when you're asking the right questions, you surface some deeper thinking, deeper layers of thinking that people are unconscious about, but yet those deeper mindsets drive your decisions. So in the mentoring, if you bring this to consciousness, because once you have to articulate it, it comes up to consciousness, then that's a fantastic outcome as a mentor.
It's a good outcome. Maybe it's not necessarily an outcome that you don't know whether the mentee is going to act on the outcomes, but that's not the point. The point is trying to identify these things and then hope that the mentee then goes away, and you go away too. Have these discussions with people, and you bring up stuff that you've done, and you find yourself walking away going, I hadn't thought about that for years.
Yes, of course.
It can help you too. And that's the other, the point about the mentor-mentee relationship, and why I've enjoyed it so much. It's a two-way street. It's not just about it's not about the mentee just winning or learning things. It's about the mentor doing the same thing, and the mentor certainly can.
So what you're telling us is, through those deep conversations, you're surfacing up deeper layers of mindsets or beliefs or thought processes that otherwise might hinder mentees taking action or solving some issues. And that, in addition to helping your mentee clarify, crystallize those deeper mindsets, you're also doing this as a mentor. Have you found that throughout the last 5 mentee interactions, you have grown yourself?
Absolutely. And an excellent example of it, and I haven't really thought about it until now, is that if you're working with someone who's had a career which is 5 years long at an associate level, just as an example, I think that you find your relationship, you go back to work and you find your relationships with people at work who are at a similar level to your mentee absolutely have to change because of what you've heard your mentee say about some of the challenges and the difficulties that they've had.
Yes.
I think it really, really helps you to relate better to some of those people in a similar level of experience.
Yes.
Or qualification at your own work.
Yes.
So that's a really tangible example of how it's been helpful to me.
We typically, as senior leaders, forget, right, what it is like to start in investment banking or any other corporate environment for the matter.
We do.
And then in the first 5 years,
Yeah.
what are your concerns? What are you looking forward to? What are you anxious about?
Yeah.
These things change over the course of our life as we mature and grow in expertise and experience.
Yeah.
Being reconnected with that as a mentor is incredibly powerful.
Incredibly. And the other point there is that when we did this, I certainly know from my experience, none of this existed when I started my career in terms of the support networks.
Of course.
The idea of mentor-mentee. I didn't
Yes.
really hear that expression until I was 15, 20 years into my
Yes.
career. But certainly as a junior, none of those support networks existed,
Yes.
which is a bad thing. And it shows how much the industry has evolved, but it also helps you to understand what people at the beginning of their career can expect and should expect, which is very different from what you had.
What you expected at the time. Yeah. So,
and a lot of that, what probably a lot of that means is that, and again, this isn't a bad thing. In many ways, it's a good thing because we didn't have that. Your biggest mentee a lot of the times was yourself. So if I think back over my career, there's an argument to say the biggest mentee I had was myself because I was never being presented with, mentor, because I was never being presented with mentors. So there's a degree of self-empowerment there, which is a great thing, but it'd be fantastic for people today who had both the ability to self-empower, to mentor themselves, as well as having a really effective external mentor.
Well, I often say that no matter how senior or experienced you are in personal development, you can never see the back of your head, right? So you can turn your head as far as you can and challenge yourself as far as you can. Yeah. It always is so powerful to have someone sitting behind you and saying, well, this is the mindset that you need to shift. This is the thing you haven't noticed.
Right.
Gerard, you've been a mentor for many years now. I'm sure that you would consider yourself more skilled today than you were when you first started. What would be the key pieces of advice that you'd have for someone who's starting out as a mentor? What do you think are the techniques or the habits that make you a good mentor today?
We spoke before about consistency. We've spoken about the idea of balance in how much you give versus how much you listen. I think that those two things are very important skills to have or develop as a mentor. Consistency is really, really important. I think that idea of demonstrating some degree of vulnerability for me at least has been a useful strategy to break down barriers which are naturally going to exist between two strangers who are asked to sit down. They didn't pick each other. You pick the mentor, you pick the mentees for us, right? So they're two strangers who are sitting around a table. There are barriers there which need to be broken down, but I think these types of techniques around consistency, demonstrating vulnerability, being open and honest, and not talking too much about yourself are important ways to create an effective environment.
Yes. And what we've discussed as well throughout this podcast is that having a focus on understanding the hidden mindsets or thought processes for your mentee. Can I ask you this last question? Because in addition to everything you have said, how do you as a mentor, and when do you start doing it? I guess not the very first session. How do you get to those deeper levels of unconscious resistance or barriers for your mentees, for the mentors who have listened to us and are empowered by this idea of helping their mentee break through some levels of discomfort? When do you know and how do you know how to elicit that level of self-awareness from your mentee?
I think it's probably just gradually is the answer,
Yes.
and you can't force that
Yes.
that kind of stuff. But a lot of it is self-discovery and self-realization. So a lot of that will come from probably has to come from the mentee. And I suppose when you've got a dialogue which becomes very open and transparent, the mentee themselves become much more willing to share those types of things themselves, and they realize it themselves. And once they do, I think you can engage more about whatever that idea is, or whatever that mindset is, which is worth talking about more and helping them with. But I think it has to come from them, and that, as you say, it's not something which happens on day one.
Yeah, you've got to wait until they are ready to be to be at that level of
And some of
awareness.
them aren't, right? Some of them, some mentees are this is no blame, but they're not there for the right reasons, and maybe they just don't want to
get to that level.
Yeah, maybe they don't want to get to that level, and that's probably also realizing that with particular cases is also realizing that maybe there's not many things that you can do to help them if they're not there to have that kind of honest appraisal.
Yes,
of
of course.
Of themselves too. And a lot of that also comes down to trust, which is another big one on day one, is saying whatever you say here today it does not go out of this room.
Yes.
I think that's always a really important way to set the scene, because that creating that degree of trust again with a stranger is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Reiterating that confidentiality in both ways.
Exactly.
I often hear mentors say, look, I'm going to be really vulnerable with you. And so, I expect that everything I share will be confidential, and you can absolutely be confident that it will be the same on my end. Gerard, we've discussed so much. Thank you so much. We have our usual rapid fire questions at the end. Are you ready for rapid fire questions?
I don't know if I am.
That's all right. We'll have a go at 2 or 3 rapid fire questions. What is the biggest mistake that we make about mentoring?
That you have to do it and you're forced into it, and you won't get anything out of it because you've been told to do it.
What do you think is the skill that a mentor learns about leadership that they won't learn in any other leadership courses?
Listening.
Yeah, love it. Yes, absolutely. What is your recommendation for HR teams putting together mentoring programs within their organization? What are the 1 or 2 key recommendations you would have?
Excellent question. Be consistent. Don't put it on one year and turn it off the next. And give some real thought to the pairing process.
Yes.
Because the pairing process, as you would know, is crucial. I know these aren't 3-word answers, but anyway.
That's good. Gerard, thank you so much for joining me today. It was awesome hearing about all your experiences of mentoring.
My absolute pleasure, Maud. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Mentoring Unlocked. This podcast is powered by MentorKey, the platform designed to make mentoring impactful. If this episode unlocked inspiration within you, please follow, share, or leave us a review.